This painting is rather emotive and it's difficult to look at. This painting represents the damage caused by the injustices within the child protection system. In April 2016, my 7-week-old baby was forcibly removed from my care. I started to scream. I am still screaming. I will never stop screaming. The removal of my baby was a violation of our human rights. At the time, there was little understanding about autism and parenting. The pain caused by the removal of my baby cannot be expressed into words, because unless you've lived through it, you could never comprehend the trauma. I'm still living through it. Nothing will ever put right what happened to our family. So much time stolen, time which can never be replaced. So much pain caused, pain that can never be erased. I'm not the same person since it happened. I will never be the same again. I feel it's important to acknowledge that when there is an absence of knowledge and understanding, the consequences can be catastrophic. The parenting experience is different for autistic people. Knowledge and understanding can make a huge difference to an autistic parent's life, leading to positive perinatal experiences. Many of my experiences were echoed within the United Kingdom Human Rights Committee report by Blakemore in 2015, outlining human rights violations against autistic parents. At the end of her report, she makes a profound comment. No woman should need to consider system failure and rights violations as part of her future reproductive choices. I am sad to say that as an autistic female, I am having to consider my reproductive choices very carefully. This is due to system failure and my own experiences of rights violations within child protection. In other words, as it stands currently within the UK, I do not feel able to have any more children because of the lack of professional understanding around autistic parenting and neurodiverse families, as well as the absence of tailored support. This is my story. In the 3rd trimester, I became increasingly anxious about becoming a parent. I informed professionals about my anxiety, and a decision was made to seek support from children's services. My anxiety became so overwhelming to the point that I wanted to die. However, I did not actually want to die. I was just so overwhelmed that I wanted to escape. Unfortunately, at the time, I was diagnosed with emotionally unstable personality disorder, shortened to EUPD, as well as having an autism diagnosis. Professionals only focused on my presentation through a mental health lens. I asked social services for some support so that I could adjust to this massive life-changing event. Social services repeatedly said, let's wait and see until after the birth. After the birth of my daughter, social services decided that they would not allow us to go home. And I was told that if I wanted the best for my baby, that I would agree to go into a mother and baby unit voluntarily. I wanted the best for my baby, so I agreed. When I arrived at the first mother and baby unit, no sensory assessment was taken, despite the fact that the most debilitating aspect of my autism is my sensory sensitivities. However, I was able to settle into the unit and function as an autistic parent. The medical staff raised concerns about the EUPD diagnosis and questioned whether it was a misdiagnosis. The staff felt that my differences could all be attributed to my autism diagnosis. The unit made it clear to children's services that I was doing well, and I needed time to adjust to my role as a parent. Unfortunately, this was not what children's services wanted to hear, and they proceeded to start legal action in order to obtain an interim care order. I had less than 24 hours to seek legal representation. When I did seek legal representation, it became apparent that the solicitor did not understand autism. She saw me as a deficit. Assumptions were made about my capacity. It was incorrectly assumed that I had a learning disability. And it was incorrectly assumed that I was experiencing a deterioration in my mental health. Due to the short notice and the unit being hundreds of miles away from the family court, as well as my autistic needs, I was unable to attend the hearing. Unfortunately, the interim care order was granted. Shortly after social services decided that they no longer wanted me on the first mother and baby unit, they enforced a medically unnecessary transfer to a different mother and baby unit. I was pressured into agreeing to this transfer. Once again, I was told by the social worker that if I wanted the best for my baby, I would agree to this transfer, which was one of the worst decisions I'd ever made in my life. When we finally arrived on the second mother and baby unit, it was very clear that the staff had no understanding about autism. They viewed my parenting from a non-autistic perspective. Staff had clear prejudice about autistic parents, believing that they could not parent long-term. I was repeatedly set up to fail. We were at this unit for 10 days until social services applied for an emergency hearing to remove my 7-week-old baby. The removal of my baby and the way the professionals forcibly removed her was one of the most inhumane treatments I've ever received in my life. I knew that I had been discriminated against, and I set out to prove that social services had unlawfully removed my baby. I applied for all our records and spent around 6 months piecing together what had happened. I discovered that social services had withheld from the court important evidence when they applied to remove my daughter, and due to my legal representation having a lack of understanding around autism and parenting, they failed to obtain this evidence despite it being readily available at the time. My daughter was placed into foster care, and I was only allowed 3 hours a week contact, which meant I had no choice but to give up breastfeeding, something that I really wanted to do. Social services refused to make reasonable adjustments for my autism, and I was repeatedly told by the social worker that they were only there for my daughter and not for me. My autism was continually used to vilify me, and throughout child protection, I experienced direct, indirect discrimination as well as rights violations simply because I'm autistic. During the lengthy care proceedings, I was reassessed and the EUPD diagnosis was revoked. I have autism and recurrent depression. It took over 18 months for me to fight my case and for my daughter to be returned to my care. Finally, the judge ruled that the first judge who authorised my daughter's removal did not have the complete picture of my parenting at the time, and I was not afforded the opportunity to demonstrate my parenting skills. The judge decided that I was able to parent my daughter to a high standard, and she was returned just before her second birthday. Ironically, it was my autistic strengths which enabled me to fight against the injustices the child protection system imposed on us as a neurodiverse family.